Ilara, the cleaner, smirked, her lips twisting into a thin, cruel line. You really think a child's tantrum could ever move me? Little Leo, tears streaming down his face, his small frame trembling, whispered, Please, don't take my food. Arthur, the billionaire, appeared from the shadows, his voice a thunderous roar that froze Ilara's smirk forever. Arthur Vance stepped through the grand oak doors of his mansion. The familiar scent of polished wood and expensive air fresheners doing little to soothe the weariness that clung to him after a grueling 2-week business trip abroad. The silence of the vast foyer, usually a welcome reprieve, felt heavy, almost oppressive. He loosened his tie, his mind still buzzing with figures and deals, yet a faint, unsettling tremor ran through him. He had missed his children, Leo and the infant Lily, more than he cared to admit, a gnawing ache in the hollow space where his heart used to reside, a space that had remained largely vacant since Clara, his beloved wife, had departed from their lives during Lily's birth. His success, his empire, felt like an empty crown without her, and his fatherhood, though deeply felt, had been distant, often outsourced to the capable, seemingly devoted hands of Ilara, their long-term housekeeper. His son, Leo, now 6, and infant Lily were largely raised by Ilara, the seemingly indispensable woman who had managed his household with unwavering efficiency for years. Arthur had trusted her implicitly, his grief and the relentless demands of his global business empire creating a convenient blind spot. He walked further into the house, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble, the silence broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible sound of a child's muffled sob. His heart, long dormant, jolted, a sudden, sharp pang of unease piercing through his exhaustion. It was Leo's cry, he realized, but laced with a raw fear that was entirely alien to the usual childish complaints. The sound drew him, pulling him deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of his own home. He followed the sound, his footsteps echoing on polished marble, leading him to the entrance of the expansive kitchen, usually a vibrant hub of activity, but now eerily quiet. Peeking around the corner, Arthur's blood ran cold. There, by the gleaming granite counter, stood Ilara, her back to him, holding a small plate of what looked like a meager portion of macaroni and cheese. Facing her, his small body hunched and trembling, was Leo, his face streaked with tears, his eyes wide with a terror that ripped through Arthur's very core. Lily, in her high chair nearby, was whimpering softly, her tiny hands reaching out for nothing in particular, her distress mirroring her brother's. Please, Ilara, Leo whimpered, his voice barely a whisper. Don't take my food. I'm so hungry. The words, simple yet utterly devastating, landed like a physical blow to Arthur's chest. He watched, frozen, as Ilara turned slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, her eyes cold and unfeeling. You've had enough, young man, she said, her voice deceptively calm, a chilling contrast to the scene unfolding. You know the rules. No more until you finish your chores, and that means everything, perfectly. She made a move to take the plate completely, and Leo, with a desperate, heartbreaking plea, reached out. No! Cleaner! Don't take my food, he begged, his little voice cracking with an anguish that would forever haunt Arthur's memory. It was in that agonizing moment, witnessing the blatant cruelty inflicted upon his son, that Arthur's world shattered, and a primal, protective fury ignited within him. He was no longer the distant businessman. He was a father, and his children were in danger. He moved, a silent, swift predator, his presence suddenly filling the room, his roar echoing through the grand kitchen, freezing Ilara in her tracks. The sudden, thunderous sound of Arthur's voice shattered the kitchen's eerie calm, a primal roar that momentarily paralyzed Ilara, her hand hovering over Leo's meager plate. her cruel smirk instantly dissolving into a mask of startled innocence. Leo, startled by his father's unexpected eruption, flinched, his small body tensing. But then his tear-filled eyes found Arthur, and a flicker of desperate hope ignited within them, a fragile spark in the vast ocean of his fear. Arthur, seeing his son's terror and the housekeeper's calculated composure, felt a cold, unyielding rage settle deep within his bones, a sensation far more potent than any business deal gone awry. He moved swiftly, closing the distance between them, his towering presence casting a long shadow over Ilara, his gaze a burning indictment that pierced through her carefully constructed facade. Arthur scooped Leo into his arms, the boy's small frame trembling against his chest, a heartbreaking fragility that twisted a knife in his father's heart. He held Leo tightly, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of his child mixed with the lingering odor of tears, a scent that now symbolized his profound failure. He had been a phantom in his children's lives, a provider of lavish comforts, but an absentee father, emotionally distant, his heart encased in a thick shell of grief since Clara's departure during Lily's birth. His empire, built on relentless ambition and a desire to fill the void Clara left, had become a gilded cage for his children, leaving them vulnerable to the very person he had trusted most. Ilara, a woman he had seen as a pillar of stability, a dedicated caregiver who had seamlessly woven herself into the fabric of his household for years, now stood exposed as a predator, her true nature laid bare by a child's desperate plea for food. Ilara, recovering from her initial shock, quickly adopted an air of aggrieved bewilderment, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Mr. Vance, what is the meaning of this?" Leo was simply being disobedient, refusing to finish his chores. "I was merely enforcing the rules you yourself set, for his own good, of course." Her words, smooth and practiced, were designed to deflect, to sow doubt, to paint Arthur's sudden intervention as an overreaction. But Arthur, his mind now razor-sharp, saw through the veneer, the tremor in her voice too controlled, the flicker of defiance in her eyes too quick. He remembered countless instances of her seemingly unwavering dedication, her meticulous attention to detail, her comforting presence, all now replayed in his mind as ominous signs of a deeply manipulative nature. He held Leo closer, the boy clinging to him as if to a lifeline, his small hand gripping Arthur's shirt with surprising strength. Arthur's gaze remained fixed on Ilara, a silent challenge. "My son was begging for food, Ilara," he stated, his voice low and dangerous, devoid of its earlier roar, yet far more chilling in its intensity. "There is no rule that justifies that." He gently placed Leo down, kneeling to meet his son's eyes, his own filled with a promise he silently vowed to keep. "Leo, my brave boy, tell Papa everything that has happened." Leo, still shaken, looked from his father to Ilara, then back to Arthur, a silent struggle playing out in his innocent gaze. The fear was still there, a shadow in his eyes, but it was now mingled with a burgeoning trust, a hope that his father, finally, truly saw him. Ilara, sensing the shift in dynamics, the undeniable challenge to her authority, attempted to regain control, her voice now tinged with a subtle, underlying threat. "Mr. Vance, I have been nothing but loyal to this family. You know how much I care for the children. Perhaps Leo is simply overtired, or exaggerating." Her eyes darted towards Lily, still whimpering softly in her high chair, a calculated move to remind Arthur of the infant's vulnerability, and perhaps of his own perceived inadequacy as a father. But Arthur was no longer the man easily swayed by guilt or manipulation. The image of Leo's tear-streaked face, his desperate plea, had irrevocably altered his perception. He noticed now the subtle changes in Leo, the way the boy flinched at sudden movements, the unnatural quietness that had settled over the mansion in recent months. dismissed by Alara as good behavior. He had been blind, utterly consumed by his own sorrow and the demands of his empire, entrusting his most precious treasures to a viper in plain sight. Arthur's mind began to piece together fragments of observations he had dismissed. The increasingly frequent locked doors to the children's wing, explained away by Alara as ensuring privacy for Lily's naps, Leo's unusual thinness, attributed to a growth spurt by the housekeeper. The faint, unidentifiable marks he had once glimpsed on Leo's arm, quickly explained as playground scrapes. Now, these seemingly innocuous details coalesced into a chilling mosaic of abuse. He saw Alara's alternating demeanor, from the overly solicitous caregiver in his presence to the cruel disciplinarian Leo had just exposed. A cold dread settled over him, mingling with a burning resolve. He had to uncover the truth, every dark corner of it, not just for Leo, but for tiny Lily, whose innocent existence had also been under this woman's malevolent shadow. He remembered a small, intricately carved wooden box Clara had always kept hidden in her study, a place where she stored her most cherished letters and mementos. Perhaps, amidst her poignant final thoughts, there might be a clue, a whisper from the past, that could help him navigate this terrifying present. Arthur, his heart still thrumming with a raw, unfamiliar fury, tightened his embrace around Leo, feeling the fragile shudder that still ran through the boy's small frame. He carried his son away from the kitchen, Alara's feigned composure doing little to mask the subtle tension in her jaw, the barely perceptible tightening of her hands. He took Leo and Lily to their sun-drenched playroom, a space usually filled with laughter that now felt muted, almost hollow. He settled Lily gently in her playpen, her tiny fingers immediately grasping a soft toy, her eyes still holding a residual sadness that tore at his soul. Kneeling before Leo, Arthur offered a plate laden with fruit and a warm glass of milk, watching as his son ate with a ravenous hunger that spoke volumes, a testament to the deprivation he had endured. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on Arthur's chest, a profound realization that his grief, his relentless pursuit of a legacy, had blinded him to the silent suffering unfolding within the very walls of his home. He had paid for comfort, for care, for the illusion of a stable upbringing, only to find it was a cruel charade. He spent the rest of the afternoon in the playroom, an unfamiliar intimacy settling between him and his children. Leo, slowly, hesitantly, began to relax, leaning against his father's side as Arthur read a story, his voice a soothing balm against the day's trauma. Lily, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, gurgled happily, her bright eyes fixed on Arthur, a silent plea for the attention she had been denied. As the golden light of the setting sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room, Arthur's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory, observations he had carelessly dismissed. He remembered the faint, almost translucent bruises on Leo's wrist, attributed by Alara to a clumsy fall, the boy's sudden shyness, once a vibrant, boisterous child, now often withdrawn, the way Alara would subtly interject herself between Arthur and his children, always with a plausible explanation, always seemingly for their benefit. He saw it all now, a tapestry of deceit woven with meticulous precision, designed to keep him distant, to maintain her control. That evening, after settling the children for the night, Arthur began his quiet investigation. He moved through the mansion like a shadow, his senses heightened. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of the ventilation system, a potential clue. His first destination was Clara's old study, a room he had left untouched since her departure, a sanctuary now filled with the ghosts of his past. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and dried lavender, Clara's favorite. He ran his hand over the polished mahogany desk, a wave of bittersweet nostalgia washing over him, followed by a surge of renewed determination. He remembered the small, intricately carved wooden box Clara had always kept hidden in a secret compartment beneath a loose floorboard near her reading chair, a place she confided held her most cherished thoughts and fears. With careful hands, Arthur lifted the worn Persian rug, revealing the slightly discolored plank. A gentle pry, and the floorboard lifted, exposing a small, dark recess. There it was, a delicate rosewood box, its surface etched with swirling patterns, a gift he had given her on their first anniversary. His fingers trembled as he opened it, revealing not jewels or trinkets, but a stack of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. The top letter, dated just weeks before Lily's birth, was addressed to him, in Clara's elegant script. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, a profound ache blooming in his chest. Clara, ever perceptive, had written of her growing unease about Ilara, noting the housekeeper's possessive nature around Leo, her subtle attempts to isolate him, and a chilling anecdote about Ilara's strangely intense reaction when Clara once mentioned revising her will, ensuring the children's future was unequivocally secure. Clara had detailed a fleeting conversation where Ilara had expressed a deep-seated resentment towards families of wealth, a bitterness that now, in the harsh light of truth, felt like a premonition. Arthur read on, his breath catching in his throat, as Clara described Ilara's increasingly manipulative tactics, the way she would subtly undermine Clara's authority, planting seeds of doubt in Leo's mind about his mother's decisions, or the chillingly calm demeanor Ilara maintained even when confronted with a blatant lie. Clara, with her gentle spirit, had dismissed some of it as stress from her pregnancy, but had still felt compelled to document her concerns, a silent warning from beyond the veil. This letter, a whisper from his beloved, was the first tangible piece of evidence, a confirmation that his dawning fears were not imagined. He clutched the letter, his resolve hardening into an unyielding steel. Ilara, the woman he had trusted with his children, was not just cruel, she was calculating, and her motivations ran deeper than simple malice. Arthur vowed, in the silent sanctity of Clara's study, that he would uncover every layer of her deception and protect his children with a ferocity he never knew he possessed. The fight for justice for his family had just begun, and he would not rest until every shadow was dispelled by the relentless light of truth. Arthur clutched Clara's letter, its delicate paper now feeling like a heavy scroll of destiny, a final, poignant plea from the woman he had loved so profoundly. The words, penned with such care and foresight, ignited a cold, righteous fury within him, solidifying his resolve. Ilara was not merely a cruel disciplinarian, she was a calculating manipulator, her actions driven by a venomous cocktail of resentment and greed, precisely as Clara had suspected. He folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his inner jacket pocket, a silent vow passing his lips in the hallowed stillness of Clara's study. He would expose her, dismantle her carefully constructed web of lies, and ensure that no harm would ever touch his children again. The night, once a time for quiet reflection or restless sleep, now became a canvas for his meticulous investigation, a silent hunt for truth within the very walls of his home. He began his surveillance subtly, installing discreet cameras in key areas of the mansion, particularly in the children's wing and common areas, ensuring Ilara's every move would be documented without her knowledge. He also delved into the household accounts, a task he had long delegated entirely to Ilara, trusting her implicitly with the management of his vast estate's daily expenditures. What he found sent a fresh wave of shock through him. There were discrepancies, small at first, then growing steadily larger over the past 2 years, since Clara's departure. Exaggerated invoices for household supplies, phantom repairs, and unexplained cash withdrawals, all meticulously disguised, but now glaringly obvious under Arthur's scrutinizing gaze. It wasn't just about Leo's food. Ilara had been systematically siphoning funds, slowly, patiently, believing her actions would go unnoticed amidst Arthur's grief and busy life. Her avarice knew no bounds, intertwining with her cruelty in a chilling display of human depravity. As Arthur's investigation deepened, he made a conscious effort to be more present, to disrupt Ilara's established routine, to reclaim his role as an active father. He started having breakfast with Leo and Lily every morning, his presence a silent challenge to Ilara's authority. He noticed how Ilara's demeanor shifted, becoming more guarded, her polite smiles tightening at the corners, her eyes flickering with a barely concealed irritation when he lingered in the children's playroom or insisted on putting them to bed himself. One evening, as he tucked Leo into bed, the boy, still tentative but growing braver in his father's newfound presence, whispered, "Ilara says Papa doesn't really care. She says he only loves his work." Arthur's heart ached, a sharp, bitter pain, realizing the depth of Ilara's insidious manipulation, how she had poisoned his children's minds against him, seeking to isolate them further. He held Leo close, his voice thick with emotion as he promised, "That's not true, my brave boy. Papa loves you and Lily more than anything in the world, more than all the work, more than all the stars." The following days became a subtle dance of power, a silent battle waged beneath the polished veneer of domesticity. Arthur would subtly question Ilara about the household budget, about specific purchases, his voice calm, almost casual, yet carrying an underlying current of scrutiny that made her visibly uncomfortable. "Ilara, I noticed a significant increase in the grocery budget this month," he might say, his eyes fixed on her, observing every flicker of her expression. She would offer elaborate explanations, her words flowing smoothly. But Arthur, armed with Clara's letter and his own growing evidence, saw through the charade. He also noticed how she would subtly try to regain control of the children, attempting to usher them away from Arthur's side, suggesting they needed a nap or had chores to do, always with a plausible excuse, always with that faint, unsettling glint in her eyes. One afternoon, Arthur was searching for an old family heirloom, a small, intricate locket that had belonged to Clara's grandmother, a sentimental piece he knew Clara had kept in a specific drawer in her dressing table. He had intended to give it to Lily when she was older. He opened the drawer, his fingers brushing against the silk lining, but the locket was gone. A cold dread washed over him. He had seen it there just a few months prior. Later that day, he subtly brought it up to Ilara, acting as if he merely couldn't remember where Clara had placed it. "Ilara, do you recall seeing Clara's locket? The small silver one?" he asked, his tone light. Ilara paused, her back to him as she arranged flowers in a vase, her movements stiffening almost imperceptibly. "Oh, Mr. Vance, I believe Mrs. Vance mentioned sending it for cleaning or repair some time ago. She was always so particular about her jewelry." Her explanation was too quick, too rehearsed, and Arthur knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was lying. The locket had never left the house. Ilara wasn't just stealing funds. She was systematically pilfering items of sentimental value, perhaps to sell, or perhaps as a perverse trophy of her dominion over the family she so deeply resented. The evidence was mounting, piece by chilling piece, and Arthur knew the time for subtle confrontation was drawing to a close. He had to prepare for the inevitable, for the storm that was brewing, for the moment he would unmask the monster living in his home. Arthur clutched Clara's letter, its delicate paper now feeling like a heavy scroll of destiny, a final, poignant plea from the woman he had loved so profoundly. The words, penned with such care and foresight, ignited a cold, righteous fury within him, solidifying his resolve. Ilara was not merely a cruel disciplinarian. She was a calculating manipulator. her actions driven by a venomous cocktail of resentment and greed, precisely as Clara had suspected. He folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his inner jacket pocket, a silent vow passing his lips in the hallowed stillness of Clara's study. He would expose her, dismantle her carefully constructed web of lies, and ensure that no harm would ever touch his children again. The night, once a time for quiet reflection or restless sleep, now became a canvas for his meticulous investigation, a silent hunt for truth within the very walls of his home. He began his surveillance subtly, installing discreet cameras in key areas of the mansion, particularly in the children's wing and common areas, ensuring Ilara's every move would be documented without her knowledge. He also delved into the household accounts, a task he had long delegated entirely to Ilara, trusting her implicitly with the management of his vast estate's daily expenditures. What he found sent a fresh wave of shock through him. There were discrepancies, small at first, then growing steadily larger over the past 2 years, since Clara's departure. Exaggerated invoices for household supplies, phantom repairs, and unexplained cash withdrawals, all meticulously disguised, but now glaringly obvious under Arthur's scrutinizing gaze. It wasn't just about Leo's food. Ilara had been systematically siphoning funds, slowly, patiently, believing her actions would go unnoticed amidst Arthur's grief and busy life. Her avarice knew no bounds, intertwining with her cruelty in a chilling display of human depravity. As Arthur's investigation deepened, he made a conscious effort to be more present, to disrupt Ilara's established routine, to reclaim his role as an active father. He started having breakfast with Leo and Lily every morning, his presence a silent challenge to Ilara's authority. He noticed how Ilara's demeanor shifted, becoming more guarded, her polite smiles tightening at the corners, her eyes flickering with a barely concealed irritation when he lingered in the children's playroom or insisted on putting them to bed himself. One evening, as he tucked Leo into bed, the boy, still tentative but growing braver in his father's newfound presence, whispered, "Ilara says Papa doesn't really care. She says he only loves his work." Arthur's heart ached, a sharp, bitter pain, realizing the depth of Ilara's insidious manipulation, how she had poisoned his children's minds against him, seeking to isolate them further. He held Leo close, his voice thick with emotion, as he promised, "That's not true, my brave boy. Papa loves you and Lily more than anything in the world, more than all the work, more than all the stars." The following days became a subtle dance of power, a silent battle waged beneath the polished veneer of domesticity. Arthur would subtly question Ilara about the household budget, about specific purchases, his voice calm, almost casual, yet carrying an underlying current of scrutiny that made her visibly uncomfortable. "Ilara, I noticed a significant increase in the grocery budget this month," he might say, his eyes fixed on her, observing every flicker of her expression. She would offer elaborate explanations, her words flowing smoothly. But Arthur, armed with Clara's letter and his own growing evidence, saw through the charade. He also noticed how she would subtly try to regain control of the children, attempting to usher them away from Arthur's side, suggesting they needed a nap or had chores to do, always with a plausible excuse, always with that faint, unsettling glint in her eyes. One afternoon, Arthur was searching for an old family heirloom, a small, intricate locket that had belonged to Clara's grandmother, a sentimental piece he knew Clara had kept in a specific drawer in her dressing table. He had intended to give it to Lily when she was older. He opened the drawer, his fingers brushing against the silk lining, but the locket was gone. A cold dread washed over him. He had seen it there just a few months prior. Later that day, he subtly brought it up to Ilara, acting as if he merely couldn't remember where Clara had placed it. "Ilara, do you recall seeing Clara's locket? The small, silver one?" he asked, his tone light. Ilara paused, her back to him, as she arranged flowers in a vase, her movements stiffening almost imperceptibly. "Oh, Mr. Vance, I believe Mrs. Vance mentioned sending it for cleaning or repair some time ago. She was always so particular about her jewelry." Her explanation was too quick, too rehearsed, and Arthur knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was lying. The locket had never left the house. Ilara wasn't just stealing funds. She was systematically pilfering items of sentimental value, perhaps to sell, or perhaps as a perverse trophy of her dominion over the family she so deeply resented. The evidence was mounting, piece by chilling piece, and Arthur knew the time for subtle confrontation was drawing to a close. He had to prepare for the inevitable, for the storm that was brewing, for the moment he would unmask the monster living in his home. Arthur spent countless hours reviewing the surveillance footage, a chilling narrative unfolding before his eyes. He saw Ilara, moments after he had left for work, transform from the solicitous housekeeper into a figure of quiet menace. He witnessed her snatching food from Leo's plate, her lips curling into a triumphant smirk as the boy's shoulders slumped in defeat. He saw her deliberately ignore Lily's cries, leaving the infant distressed for extended periods, only to rush to her side with feigned concern the moment Arthur's car pulled into the driveway. The footage confirmed the bruises on Leo's arm, not from a fall, but from Ilara's rough grip, her hands clamping down on his small wrist during a tantrum. Each frame was a fresh wound to Arthur's soul, a stark reminder of his profound failure to protect his children. The guilt was suffocating, yet it fueled a relentless fire within him, transforming his sorrow into an unyielding resolve. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was compiling an irrefutable case, a meticulously documented testament to Ilara's calculated cruelty. His bond with Leo deepened rapidly, a lifeline thrown to a drowning boy. Arthur started taking Leo on short walks in the sprawling gardens, listening patiently as the boy, still hesitant, began to share fragments of his fear. "Ilara says if I tell, she'll make you angry," Leo whispered one afternoon, his eyes wide with lingering apprehension, clinging tightly to Arthur's hand. Arthur knelt, pulling Leo into a tight hug, his voice a soothing balm. "Papa will never be angry with you, my brave boy. Never. You can tell Papa anything, and Papa will protect you." Lily, too, blossomed under his renewed attention, her gurgles of delight filling the mansion with a joyful sound that had been absent for too long. Arthur found himself rediscovering the simple joys of fatherhood, the warmth of a child's embrace, the innocent wonder in their eyes, a stark contrast to the cold, calculating world of his business empire. He realized that this connection, was the true inheritance he needed to protect. Ilara, sensing the shift in Arthur's demeanor, the increasing scrutiny in his gaze, grew visibly agitated. Her once impeccable composure began to fray at the edges. She still maintained her subservient facade, but her movements became sharper, her smiles less convincing, her eyes darting nervously when Arthur entered a room unexpectedly. One evening, Arthur found her rummaging through Clara's study, ostensibly tidying, but her fingers lingered suspiciously around the area of the loose floorboard. "Ilara, what are you doing in here?" Arthur asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that made her flinch. She stammered, offering a convoluted explanation about dusting, her face flushing crimson, her gaze avoiding his. Arthur simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her lie, letting her know, without words, that her deceit was no longer invisible. He had already moved the hidden box, knowing she would eventually seek it out. The next morning, Arthur called his closest confidant, a sharp, empathetic lawyer named Evelyn Reed, who specialized in family law and corporate ethics. He spoke in hushed, urgent tones, describing the harrowing evidence he had meticulously gathered: Clara's letter, the detailed financial irregularities, the surveillance footage, and Leo's heartbreaking whispers. Evelyn, her voice grave, listened intently, her professional calm barely masking her shock. "Arthur, this is truly disturbing. We have more than enough to proceed. We need to act swiftly and decisively to ensure the children's safety and bring this woman to justice." Arthur felt a tremor of fear, but also a profound sense of relief. The fight was no longer just his. He had an ally. He knew the path ahead would be arduous, fraught with emotional pain and public scrutiny, but for Leo and Lily, for Clara's memory, he would face it all. The storm was no longer brewing, it was about to break, and Arthur, no longer a distant observer, stood ready to meet it head-on, armed with truth, courage, and an unshakable love for his children. The wheels of justice, though often slow, began to turn with a quiet, relentless momentum, propelled by Arthur's unwavering resolve and Evelyn's sharp legal mind. The mansion, once a sanctuary, then a stage for Ilara's cruel charade, now became a place of measured tension, a calm before the inevitable storm. Arthur, fortified by Evelyn's guidance, formally notified Ilara of her termination, citing gross misconduct and theft. Her initial reaction was a practiced blend of outrage and wounded innocence, her voice rising in a theatrical crescendo as she declared her loyalty and threatened legal action for defamation. But Arthur, no longer swayed by her manipulations, simply presented her with a sealed envelope containing irrefutable evidence: a detailed accounting of the stolen funds, a copy of Clara's letter, and a quiet mention of the surveillance footage. The color drained from Ilara's face, her carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of undeniable truth. Her protests dissolved into a guttural gasp, a flicker of raw fear replacing her feigned indignation. The police were called, not for a violent confrontation, but for a formal arrest. Her hands cuffed behind her back, her once commanding presence reduced to a trembling figure, led away from the home she had so brazenly violated. The ensuing legal proceedings were a harrowing journey, yet a necessary one for Arthur and his children. The courtroom, with its somber wood and hushed tones, became the arena where Ilara's darkness was finally brought into the searing light. Evelyn, with her calm, authoritative voice, presented Clara's letter, its words a poignant echo from the past, revealing the depths of Ilara's early manipulations and Clara's prescient fears. The financial records, meticulously compiled by Arthur's forensic accountants, laid bare Ilara's systematic theft, a cold, hard testament to her greed. Then came the surveillance footage, played silently for the court, a chilling, undeniable narrative of neglect and emotional abuse. The images flashed across the screen, Ilara snatching food from Leo's small plate, her cruel smirk, her deliberate indifference to Lily's distressed cries, her rough handling of Leo's arm. Each frame was a hammer blow to Arthur's heart, a fresh wave of guilt washing over him, yet strengthening his resolve to see justice served. He held Leo's hand throughout the proceedings, the boy's small fingers clinging to his, a silent understanding passing between them. The most poignant testimony came from Leo himself, delivered with the careful guidance of a child psychologist, his words recorded and played in court to spare him the direct trauma of the stand. His innocent voice, filled with a lingering fear that still pricked Arthur's soul, recounted Ilara's rules, her threats, her withholding of food, her constant whispers about his father's supposed indifference. "Cleaner said Papa didn't love me," Leo's voice echoed through the silent courtroom, "and if I told, she would make Papa go away." The collective gasp from the gallery was almost imperceptible, yet its emotional weight was immense. When the prosecution rested, a palpable tension filled the air, the weight of the evidence pressing down on everyone, most notably on Ilara. Her carefully maintained composure, which had faltered only slightly throughout the trial, now began to crumble visibly. As the verdict of guilt on multiple charges was read, a hush fell over the courtroom. broken only by the sharp intake of breath from Ilara. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, now blazed with a raw, unbridled fury, her lips twisting into a grotesque sneer. "You think you've won, Mr. Vance?" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the chamber, devoid of its earlier composure, a guttural sound of pure venom. "You think your money makes you invincible. You were never there. Never! You left them to me, you fool. You deserve to lose them. You deserve to suffer, just like I suffered, watching you parade your perfect life, your perfect wife, your perfect children." Her outburst was a torrent of bitterness, a chilling confession that laid bare the twisted roots of her resentment and envy, a dark tapestry of thwarted ambition and deep-seated anger against the wealth she believed had been unjustly denied. To her, the judge gavelled for order, but Ilara's words, sharp and cutting, hung in the air, a final desperate act of malice that solidified her condemnation and offered a perverse, if terrifying, understanding of her motivations. Arthur, holding Leo's hand tighter, felt a profound sense of closure, not from Ilara's suffering, but from the truth finally revealed, a truth that would now allow his family to truly begin healing. The sentence was swift and just, a testament to the power of truth and the unyielding pursuit of justice for the most vulnerable. 2 years had woven a tapestry of profound change within the grand walls of the Vance mansion, transforming it from a place shadowed by sorrow and deceit into a vibrant sanctuary of light and laughter. Arthur, no longer the distant magnate consumed by his work, had shed the heavy cloak of his past grief and guilt, emerging as a father fully present, his heart overflowing with a love he had once thought lost forever. His mornings no longer began with urgent calls, but with the joyful chaos of breakfast shared with Leo and Lily, their small hands reaching for his, their innocent chatter filling the expansive dining room with a melody sweeter than any symphony. The memories of Clara, once a source of aching emptiness, now brought a gentle warmth, a quiet strength that guided his every step, reminding him of the beautiful legacy she had left behind. Leo, now a bright and confident 8-year-old, scampered through the sprawling gardens, his once haunted eyes now sparkling with unbridled joy. He helped Arthur tend to the rose bushes, his small fingers carefully pruning away dead leaves, learning the delicate art of nurturing life. "Papa, look how strong this one is growing," he would exclaim, holding up a vibrant bloom, a mirror of his own resilient spirit. Lily, a delightful toddler of 3, chased butterflies across the manicured lawns, her infectious giggles echoing through the air, her tiny feet pattering across the grass in pure delight. Arthur would often scoop her up, burying his face in her soft hair, inhaling the sweet scent of childhood, a tangible reminder of the precious life he had fought so hard to protect. Family meals were no longer silent, hurried affairs, but joyous gatherings, filled with stories, shared dreams, and the unwavering embrace of unconditional love. The mansion itself seemed to breathe anew, its polished marble and antique furnishings now reflecting the warmth of a home truly lived in, truly loved. The hidden cameras had long been removed, replaced by open doors and boundless trust. Arthur had dedicated himself not only to his children's emotional healing, but also to creating a support network around them, ensuring their safety and well-being were paramount. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in corporate empires or grand estates, but in the unbreakable bonds of family, in the quiet moments of connection, and in the fierce, protective love that pulsed within his heart. The journey had been arduous, marked by pain and profound revelations, but it had forged a man reborn, a father transformed, and a family united against the shadows of the past. The truth, once a weapon against deceit, had become the foundation upon which their new life was built, a testament to courage and the enduring power of love. Ilara's malice had been exposed, her greed and cruelty brought to justice, proving that even the darkest intentions cannot extinguish the light of innocence and the strength of a father's unwavering protection. Arthur understood now that while the world could be a place of both immense beauty and profound cruelty, it was within the sanctuary of family, forged by truth and sustained by unconditional love, that true happiness resided. What would you do to protect a child from the unseen dangers lurking in plain sight? How far would you go to unveil the truth, to seek justice, and to rebuild a shattered world with the unwavering power of love? Share your thoughts and join the conversation, remembering that every child deserves a home filled with safety, warmth, and boundless affection. For in every act of courage, in every whisper of truth, and in every embrace of unconditional love, we build a world where goodness triumphs, where justice finds its way, and where the most vulnerable among us are cherished above all else.